Okay, here I have the unit circle. I have my reference angle here is t. And just a reminder that the reference angle can be referred to as theta, which I think we've been using more in class, but tonight's homework refers to the reference angle as t. And just to remind you that the cosine of t is the x value here, um, and the sine of t is the y value, right? Every reference angle touches the circumference of the circle and gives us an ordered pair. So we discussed this in class. Go ahead and refer back to your graphic organizer. With all of these come from the three special right triangles, these values. So I'm going to give you just some practice problems that are similar to tonight's homework. Let's start with, what if I said that t is pi over 4? So let me actually just change colors. There we go. So if t is pi over 4 and I wanted the x value is going to be root 2 over 2. And in assessments, I ask that you enter this as a decimal and that you round to 2 decimal places. So that's going to give you 0.71. Right? X is positive, it's quadrant 1, and that's it. Okay, so let's actually just make some room and leave this up here. What if we look at another angle? Let's say we look at this angle right here, where t now is 2 pi over 3. And again, it's every reference angle gives us an ordered pair on the unit circle. So here's xy again. And some of the homework questions asked for you to give the sine, the cosine, and the tangent. And again, you're rounding to 2 decimal places. So let's see, the sine of t, the cosine of t, and the tangent of t. And tangent of t, we discussed that in class today, because that was a new ratio that we learned about today. So the sine of t, well, that's just going to be what the y is in this quadrant. And if I know what pi of 3 is, I know what 2 pi of 3 is. It's part of the pi over 3 family. So pi over 3 in quadrant 1, that's just positive root 2 over 3. I'm sorry, positive root 3 over 2. Whoops. And in quadrant 2, y is still positive. And we know that sine of t is y. So yes, it's still root 3 over 2. So I'm going to put that answer right underneath it, and I'll do it in a different color. Let's do it in green. So positive root 3 over 2. And remember, yeah, in assessments, we have to enter it as a decimal, so it's going to be 0.87. So yes, if you know the reference angles in quadrant 1, you know all the values. If you know the ordered pairs in quadrant 1, they're the same throughout. The signs just change depending on what quadrant you're in. Let's take a look at the cosine of t if t is 2 pi over 3. Well, in quadrant 1, pi over 3 is 1/2. And 2 pi over 3 is still in that pi over 3 family. So I know it's going to be either 1/2 or negative 1/2. What is the x value in quadrant 2? Is it positive or negative? You're right, it's negative. So my answer isn't positive 1/2, it's negative 1/2. And again, in assessments, 0.5 or 0.50. And finally, tangent of t. Well, the tangent of t is not an x value or a y value. In fact, it's y over x, because the tangent of t is equal to the sine of t over the cosine of t. So it's just the y over x value. Okay, so in that case, that's going to be root 3 over 2 over negative 1/2. So tangent in this quadrant is negative, and we just have to clean this up a little bit. Okay, so let me actually make some room for us. Let me kind of erase this stuff. So let's clean this up. And I know that for homework we're using calculators, but I really want you to be able to do this by hand, because in class we're not going to have calculators. So root 3 over 2 divided by negative 1/2 is the same as root 3 over 2 multiplied by negative 2 over 1, right? Dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. And you can either cancel out ahead of time or multiply it out. So I have negative root 2 root 3 over 2. I'm just multiplying numerator with numerator and denominator with denominator, and I can cancel these 2's, divide both by 2, so I'm left with negative root 3. And that's my answer, negative root 3. And on your calculator, you want to enter negative root 3, and that's going to give you, if you round to 2 decimal places, negative 1.73. So go ahead and do this on your calculators and make sure you are entering it correctly. And let's move on to our next problem. So the next series of problems is looking at negative angles, giving me the sine, the cosine, and the tangent of negative angles. So let's erase this and examine negative angles. And this is going to be our last example before you attempt the homework. Okay? And you are ready for this. Okay. So let's take a look. I'm going to pick, again, a number that is not on your homework, and that's going to be negative pi over 6. So let's see, let's do it. So that's going to be over here. Here's my ordered pair. Here is my x and my y. And this, remember, with negative angles, we go clockwise. So negative pi over 6, the x-axis is still 0, and negative pi over 6 is right over here. Okay, let me just erase that. Okay. So negative pi over 6, well, again, it's in the pi. If you know pi over 6, you know everything in the pi over 6 family, the positive and the negatives. So I know that let's take a look at what is the sign. Let me just change colors here. So what is the sign of pi over 6? Well, the sign of pi over 6 is 1/2, or 0.5. So I know my answer for negative pi over 6 is going to be either positive 1/2 or negative 1/2. That's it. That's the only change. So what is the sign of negative pi over 6? Well, consider what quadrant this angle is in. This angle is in the 4th quadrant, and y is negative in this quadrant. So your answer is negative 0.5. Okay, what about cosine of negative pi over 6? Well, cosine of negative pi over 6, again, it's part of the pi over 6 family. What is the cosine of positive pi over 6? Because that's really the only one you have to memorize. Well, the cosine of positive pi over 6 is root 3 over 2. So the cosine of negative pi over 6 is going to be either positive root 3 over 2 or negative root 3 over 2. Let's consider quadrant 4 and what the x values are, since cosine of t is x. What x is in quadrant 4. And of course, x is positive in quadrant 4. So yes, the cosine of negative pi over 6 is indeed root 3 over 2. Round to 2 decimal places, that's going to give me positive 0.87. And finally, the tangent. And I'll do that up here. What is the tangent of negative pi over 6? Well, you have the sine and you have the cosine, so you have enough information to calculate your tangent. And it's much easier to do this as in fraction form, particularly if you're not given a calculator, which you won't be given a calculator in class. So let's take a look. We know that the tangent is sine over cosine. So it's 1/2 divided by, negative 1/2, I'm sorry, divided by root 3 over 2, which is the same as negative 1/2 times 2 over root 3. And these cancel out, and I'm left with negative 1 over root 3. And just on your calculator, go ahead and divide negative 1 by the square root of 3. You're going to round that to 2 decimal places, and you're going to get negative 0.58. So negative 0.58. Okay. And the homework is just like this, and you're ready for this. We discussed this in class. Okay. See you all tomorrow.